I'm gonna plant some lavender. So it is now spring. It's time to get gardening going in earnest. I have lost a lot of my garden to the freeze, but hey, you know, it's time to start over. We're gonna plant some lavender. I've ordered this lavender. I've got a couple of them, and yeah, nice little starts here. Man, they smell so good. We're gonna plant some lavender, and I'll show you how to do it. So lavender is one of those plants that thrives in poor soil. It's a plant that's a Mediterranean origin plant. It's kind of like rosemary. In fact, it shares a lot of similarities with rosemary. You could put it in the worst soil you have and it will thrive on that. Lavender requires a really well draining soil, and it requires a lot of light, so good sunlight, at least 6 to 10 hours a day minimum. And so I've got a lot of soil back here. I've got a lot of old potting mixes that are probably just right, depleted, well draining, and we're going to put some lavender in there. I have a lot of pots back here sitting around waiting to be recycled, and in these pots we have soil that has been largely depleted by the plants that grew in them. And you know what? This one right here looks pretty good. Let's see here. That's pretty basic potting mix, and that's all we need. Because lavender requires well draining soil and does not thrive on really rich soil, I'm going to grow some of this lavender in a cloth pot. That will ensure that we get nice drainage, and the soil that I have here is all recycled potting mix. This is a lot of organic material, and I'm going to mix in some perlite just to make sure that this is nice and well draining, kind of arid, and really replicates that Mediterranean soil that lavender is native, grows natively in. So let's do that. I'm going to take a lot of this soil out and put it in here, these little pots here, so that I can mix up some perlite in there. That will give good drainage and a lot of aeration to the soil. We don't want water standing in the lavender. So I have a lot of this perlite. This perlite, people think that it retains moisture. Well, it does a little bit, but perlite mostly encourages air retention in the soil. So I'm going to mix a lot of this perlite in here and just mix it up with this depleted soil and make it a little more sandy and aerated and more like a Mediterranean type soil. Most of this potting mix that is in here is peat moss, and it's filled with a lot of organic material which naturally drains well. So here's what we're after, something that's very loose, lots of perlite in there. You could use sand, you could use some coarse sand, you could even mix some pebbles in here. And I'm not going to amend the soil whatsoever. Lavender is very much like rosemary. In fact, you could grow them side by side. They thrive in soil that's poor. And so this is pretty poor soil. This soil has grown peppers last year, and I think that some of this is soil that I've had even from years before. So I need a little more soil. Let me mix some up. A little more soil, a little more perlite. Now that may look like a lot, and this perlite is actually kind of wet. But once you mix it in, it kind of disappears in there. And what we're after is a very airy, light soil that that drains really well. The benefit of a cloth pot is it helps that water in here drain. You don't have to have holes in it, obviously, but it helps the water drain, and it helps the moisture wick out. This is actually an ideal situation, an ideal kind of pot for lavender. So we're going to put our lavender right in here. I'm going to put one in this one, and I'm going to grow another in a raised bed. Now this lavender I bought from Hertz Gardens online. It does not tell me the exact cultivar, but that's okay. Most lavenders grow pretty much the same. You can see this lavender has a flower head, and it looks like it might be a little bit stunted, but yeah, it's overall a good looking plant. especially considering the fact that they shipped it to me in the mail. The roots are coming out the bottom. It's ready to be potted up, so we'll gently bring that out. Look at these roots. These roots are circling badly. They're very much ready to be potted up. So I'm going to break up these roots a little bit, try to tease them out. You're not going to hurt your plant by breaking up the root ball, but what you're going to do is stimulate root growth, and it's not going to be so bound up down in there that your plant's going to keep circling. You want to break them up a little bit. So that done. Wow, that's a lot of root binding in there. That done, let's dig a hole. Again, I'm just going to put one plant in here, and I'm just going to bury it up to the level that it already was buried. Now, that is pretty much all there is to it. Now, you can mulch this, but you don't want a mulch that's going to retain a lot of moisture. You just want a mulch that's going to kind of suppress weed growth in there. Or you want no mulch at all, because again, lavender wants a dry soil, an arid soil. It doesn't need a bunch of moisture. And so for right now, I think I'm going to leave it like this, and I might come back and put some leaves on here to mulch a little bit lightly if I get some weed pressure. But other than that, that's it. That is my lavender. This will grow as a perennial, and it will grow from 5 to 10 years, maybe even more, if I prune it and care for it and keep it nicely trimmed. This lavender has such a beautiful smell. Wow, I can already smell it now. So let's get this placed in our garden. We're not going to water in. This soil already has a lot of moisture in it, and it's in good contact now with those roots. This is probably one of the easiest plants to grow once you get it up started from seed, and that's why I just bought a start. I was buying something anyway. I thought, hey, I need some lavender. My wife needs some lavender. Let's put a pot of lavender in our garden. I have a second lavender plant, and I'm going to put this in a raised bed, and hopefully this will establish itself as a perennial, and I will be able to prune it and keep it in my herb garden. And yeah, well, we're going to try it. I have this little 2x6 bed here. It's a raised bed. It's about 12 inches tall. It's got about 10 inches of soil in it. And I've planted some herbs in here. I want this to be my herb garden, and I want a lot of pollinator attractors in there. Lavender is one of the greatest pollinator attractors you can have. It will call the bees in from miles around. So I'm going to put my lavender plant right here in the corner, and hopefully it will establish itself and we can keep it pruned back and maybe have a nice little shrub right here for years to come. So yeah, let's get it in there. This soil right here actually is pretty low fertility. It's all of it is depleted potting soil from last year, and I've grown 2 crops in here, so the soil is even more depleted. I haven't really amended this soil, so it's perfect for what we need. It's well draining, it's really light, there's not much to it. This is ideal for the lavender. I'm just going to dig a hole, and I can feel some of the wood down there in the bottom of this hole that is remnants of my hugelkultur bed here. You can see all that mycorrhizal fungi on that log there. That's good stuff. We're just going to put our lavender right here in the corner and hope that it does well. You can see again the roots are pretty bound up in there, but not as bad as the other one. They're actually kind of loose there, so we're just going to drop this in and backfill. This soil actually does have some sand in it. I took some playground sand that I had on hand and I put it in here so that I could plant things like lavender, like rosemary, things that are Mediterranean in nature that require a really coarse, well-draining soil. So while there is some organic material in here, there's also some sand. This should be ideal. When dealing with plants like lavender, you have to remember that they're used to soils that are natively not very moisture retentive. They don't have a lot of moisture in them. They drain really well. They're not very fertile. So we must avoid the temptation when we pot up our lavender to fertilize and give them a lot of nutrition and a lot of, kelp meal and fish emulsion and 10-10-10. remember, they don't like that. And even though you might think if I give them all that stuff, they'll grow better, the reality is they're not made for that. They won't grow better. They will actually react negatively. So don't fertilize your lavender when you first plant it. You might come back later on. There might be a condition where you need to fertilize later in its life, but right now, let it get established in the pot or in the plot that you put it in. Let it get used to that native soil that it's now going to have to grow in. Don't amend it. Don't put anything in there, and your plant will thank you for it. Pretty easy stuff, huh? I'm growing lavender for several reasons, but one of the reasons I like the most is that it attracts pollinators. Pollinators are those insects that come and they're attracted by flowers, and they can smell the flowers and the nectar from far off. They come to your garden and they tend to hang around and gather up all the pollen they can from the various flowers, thus pollinating your vegetable crops and your fruit trees. Well, lavender is just one of those plants that has such a smell that it's wonderful, and bees love it. So hopefully we'll get some lavender blossoms this year. If not, we'll get a lot of them next year, and I'm going to show you through the years how to prune and keep and trim and shape and maintain your lavender plant. So that's what I'm doing here in the garden. I'm putting in a lot of new stuff, a lot of new things, a lot of new adventures are in store for my garden, including lavender, lots of herbs, lots of medicinal plants, but also we've got lots of fruit. We've got lots of new kinds of trees, new fruit trees. We're going to be planting some pawpaws, some blackberries, some gooseberries. All kinds of wonderful things are coming to Black Gumbo Southern Gardenings because we're going to make the best out of our bad freeze that we had. So, if you like our content, please subscribe and like us on Facebook and Instagram. Hey, happy gardening to you. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.